Hey fam, I hope you're doing fine. Welcome to yet another episode of the Evolve with Intent podcast. In today's episode, I have exciting news to share. Yeah. Did you guys know that I've been doing podcasting for the last 2 years? I know, right? I know. I was going through my analytics the other day and then I was trying to see how my podcast has progressively grown for the last 1 year or so. And then I scrolled back to my first episode and then I realized that it went out in July, 2 years ago on the 6th of July. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, wow, I've actually been doing this for the last 2 years and I've learned so much really. I've learned so much things I wouldn't have made sense with if I just read it off a book or just listen to someone teach me about it. And a lot of you have reached out about how to start a podcast, and usually I just send texts. I give you a simplified summary of what you need to know. And then I thought to myself when I went through these analytics, and I'm like, how about I just do an episode to take you guys through the lessons, my experience as a podcaster, solo podcaster for the last 2 years. So in today's episode, basically, if you are someone who's been thinking about starting a podcast, this is a great place to start. Stick around and I will see you on the other side as I tell you all about my experience as a solo podcaster for the last 2 years. Yay! Now, first things first, before starting your own podcast, this is very obvious, but it's very key moving forward. You need an idea. I like to think about podcasts as a way to communicate, which they truly are. So in communication, we are taught, why are you communicating? Why are you picking up the mic to speak? Is it to educate us, to entertain us, to provoke our thoughts? That should be your why. What's the point of this? Are you trying to inspire people, to motivate people, to change the world? Whatever your reason is, you need to find that reason and then align it with your idea. Take, for example, you're a passionate law student or a lawyer, depending on whatever point of life you are at. And that's very key, by the way. Podcasts make way more sense if you're sharing things from the exact point of life you're at. It does not make sense for me or for you as an aspiring podcaster to go and pick things from Mars and then come and preach them to us on your podcast here on Earth, because first of all, you've not lived the experience. You cannot relate and neither will your audience relate. I know what you're thinking. You're like, how about if I did research about a particular topic and then came on here and told my audience about it? That's very different. When you decide to take for example, speak about global warming, you definitely have to do research about it. But at the end of the day, your audience doesn't want a boring, 15, 30-minute episode of you just telling them about a research paper you read about how global warming is bad and it's gonna destroy the world. At the end of the day, people can do that for themselves. People can open the internet and read 5 different papers on global warming and still get the point. The whole point of podcast is it's personalized. So it's you in your own element, in your own authenticity, showing emotion, telling your story, and then maybe blending in different pieces of research that you picked from different resources on the internet. The whole point is for you to, and I think that's the beauty and unique bit about podcasts, is that it's your show. You run the show. You have a great opportunity to connect with your audience without any other distractions, really, without anyone holding you back. So you want to make sure you're taking good use of it without getting carried away and lost in the entire information overload of the internet. So find your idea, find your why, and do research about it, and then blend all that, and then you'll have somewhere to start. At this point, you're not recording yet. You're still journaling. So I hope all this is happening in your notebook. The beauty about journaling your entire thought process of creating your own podcast is most of these things now start to pop up. The ideas, the answers to like different questions on how to start your podcast. For some reason, they start popping up. So before you know it, you'd have to niche down to like, okay, for me, my podcast is about climate change, and under climate change, we talk about global warming. For me, my podcast is about education, and under education, we just specifically talk about law, depending on whatever you've chosen to do. Now, niching down really does help you because there's a saying, I don't even know how exactly it goes, but it goes, a master of all is a master of none, something like that. So while starting out, as much as your mind is blowing up with all these different ideas on what you wanna talk about, it's exciting. It can be a great thing that you're versatile, and but podcasters, the successful ones, really advise on one thing. You need to niche it down, narrow it down to a particular category or theme or thing, so that they say, if I'm looking for marriage advice, I'm going to go and listen to Joanne's podcast. If I'm looking for mechanical engineering advice or lessons, or to hear from different mechanical engineers in the world, I'll go and listen to Tom's episode. So depending on whatever you're passionate about, I'm assuming the idea you want to speak about is something you're passionate about. I hope it's not something you're doing because, oh, it's the trendy thing to talk about right now, because your podcast won't see its first birthday and you want to make sure it does. So while you figure out your why, please find a topic, find an idea, find a why that you are passionate about. It will help you push your podcast way farther than passion goes a long way, really, along with the hard work you invest in. So narrow it down to a particular theme so that you are specific, so that you're not all over the place. You waste a lot of energy and time. You don't even fully exhaust out ideas because now you're all over the place. You don't know what to capitalize on and what not to. Again, we're still in our notebook, yeah? So you've niched down, you've figured out a number of 2-3 topics that you're still, I want this, take your time. You're no one is chasing you. You can still start your podcast next year in January and it's still successful. Hope you're not in a rush. And still in the same notebook, you want to do some research and find out if there are other people doing a similar podcast. Yeah? Now, this helps for you to know what people are already doing and what unique angle you can take to address a similar issue. If people are doing different podcasts on marriage, there's a bunch of those in Uganda. If it's something you want to do as well, once you see what other people are doing on YouTube or wherever, it gives you the idea to think differently. If you're thinking of it the normal way, I'm going to give you 5 tips on how your marriage can be successful, this case you won't do that. You'll think of other creative ways to still communicate your message in regards to marriage, but not the normal, usual way. That way, you're able to capture your audience's attention. Now, speaking of audience, again in the notebook, like I said, please journal all this entire process down. It really helps. Your information is not all over the place like it is in your brain. It is in one page. Now, when you niche down with your idea, with your why you're communicating, in your why there is where you're going to find your target audience. Which people are you speaking to? How old are they? What are their habits? Where is their head at? For my episode, I've always known that I share from my personal experiences and I'm talking to people most definitely in my age group, but lately as the podcast has evolved, I've noticed that there isn't an actual age limit for this thing. So for young adults from like maybe 18 onwards, 15 onwards, really, like the personal development and growth and evolution to become better beings really does not stop. Even at 40, at 50, there is still so much to learn, So if your ideas are that versatile, good for you. You don't even have to like worry about, but definitely at some point that there has to be like a bigger target audience. I would say my huge target audience are people in their 20s, 30s than people who are in their 50s. For you as well, you need to, with your idea, you need to know who you are speaking to. That really does help you to package your content. Like if my people are this age and this is what they do and this is where their head is at, These are their needs. These are some of the things I can discuss to address and help them, or whatever your why is for your podcast. Still in the same notebook, when you keep going through all that information that you've already journaled down, your niche, your why, your idea, your target audience, the subtopics you'd be discussing, in those subtopics are where you're going to find your episode ideas. And that's why it's important to keep your target audience in mind. What are their needs? What conversations do they want to hear? Which kind of people are they interested? Are they thought leaders? If your podcast is going to be a solo one or one where you host people over, for you to actually create relevant content that people want to consume, you need to be in the heads of your target audience. What are they thinking about? What would they be interested in? What are their struggles? In marketing and sales, they usually say focus on the customer. What are their needs? They don't care about your product. What of their problems are you solving? And that really helps even with ideation of your podcast episodes. What is my target audience listening in? What are they interested in, away from all these things you're passionate and you want to speak about and show the world that you're brilliant about them? At the end of the day, it doesn't make sense if no one is interested in that information. So you need to be listening as much. Speak to your friends, do surveys if you can, ask different people what are people in this age group or in this category, take your time on the ideation so much that you don't struggle, which I think I learned along the way for my podcast, because unlucky for me, I did of course watch tutorials and consume all this information, but of course, being who I was, most of this information was just going over my head. I really didn't pick up on it. So when I started, as much as I did journal, I didn't journal as much. So I found myself stranded. I think after the first 5-6 episodes, I think I felt like I was out of ideas, which wasn't true, because initially I'd not done this thought process fully. That's why I keep emphasizing you need to exhaust yourself, right? 5, 6, 10 pages of all these things you have, and in there you will find the most mind-blowing episode ideas that you can have with different people or with yourself. As your ideation process progresses, you will notice that at some point you'll need a podcast name. You will need a slogan. You'll need to name it. And is it going to be about yourself, Tom's podcast or Peter's podcast? Is it going to be, you'll spend a lot of time, which was the case for me as well. I spent a lot of time going back and forth about the name. Initially, I'll share with you guys. Initially, my podcast name was called Joanne's 2 Cents Podcast. And at that point, the challenge I think I'd not done this thought process exhaustingly. Like, I'd not fully dug deep within to find out why I was doing this podcast. So, and honestly, when I think about it then, the reason as to why I'd called it Joanne's 2 Cents was because I was afraid. Hear this one clearly. I was afraid someone would ask me, who asked you? Ridiculous, right? Like, I was at the back of my mind, I had this voice telling me some random person is gonna, one of those people who have seen me in my past life would come and ask me, who asked for your ideas? Who asked for your conversation? So as a form of self-defense, I thought if someone asked me, I would say 2 cents. And 2 cents in the English way means unsolicited opinions, like something no one asked for. I'll give my 2 cents on. So I oh my God, can you believe, like, I would shape my entire podcast name off fear in my head? And it went on for the first year. I did change it last year because I changed it because at some point it feels like the only reason someone would care about Joanne's 2 cents was because they knew Joanne. I wanted a name that you don't have to know me or to like me or to, I don't know, to even exist in the same space. For you, when you scroll and find it, to pick up the information on there. So I went back to my why. Why am I doing this? Why am I passionate about this? Like, what really wakes me up in the morning to record an episode? I tapped into that passion and then came up with the Evolve with Intent podcast. The whole idea of it was centered around the entire soul existence of my podcast. And a year later, I still feel solid and strong about it. I am not sure how I'll feel about it next year this time. But the point is, the beauty about podcasts is that it's yours. You run the show. You get to learn on the job. Yeah, so it's the era of the internet. Yeah, so the name is going to be very important at this point. If you want to do something around your name, please feel free. But the challenge with that is that people would have to know who you are to listen in. So unless you don't mind that, then please. But if you want to create a podcast that surpasses, boundaries and all these limitations, really make it something catchy, something that when I am scrolling on the internet and I find it, I'm like, what's that about? I listened to a podcast called The Academy of Ideas. This guy talks about random, I don't want to say conspiracies, but like different theories of fear, destruction, religion, and I think he's a philosopher or something. When I landed on that name, Academy of Ideas, I'm like, okay, the podcast is not even about the guy's name, or you get. So and for me, I think that's my favorite way of naming a podcast, is that I want something that can stand on its own, so that if at any point I passed on or ceased to exist or something happened to me, the podcast would still be able to carry on with someone else, the evolved intent. It would still be evolution intentionally, but it's not about the voice or the person. It's about the content. If there is anything solid I've learned in the last 2 years of podcasting, is that content is king. You could get away with your name being funny or your voice being a bit shaky. You could get away with these other nitty-gritties, really. But if your content is not as good, your podcast will not be received really well by your audience. Because unlike TV, or unlike you working on a recognized radio station where people are like, oh, this is Sanyo FM, let me listen in, and then they find you and they're like, okay. With podcasts, unless also you're doing video podcasts and people now are watching you, but if you're doing the ordinary way that we all really start out with, imagine someone in a dark room lying on their bed trying to catch some sleep, and then they're like, okay, let me listen to this guy's podcast. And then they tune in, and for some reason you're all over the place blabbering about this and that and that and that without it not getting anywhere. I am sorry, your podcast won't be received well. So invest in content. That's why your entire ideation process is very important, for you to know what value are you providing. I wanted to expand on value addition later, but let me bring it in now. In your why, in your idea, in your passion, you need to be willing to provide value. People's attention spans lately, we all know that with the internet happening, there's an information overload. People don't have time. They would rather listen to an entire album of from Chris Brown or whoever than listen to you just going about God knows what, things you really not planned out well, things you're not really sure about. That's why I said you need to know what you're talking about. You just can't pick up the mic and start reading for a research paper you read about from the internet. You probably have an exclusive feature to it. If they wanted to listen to a news bulletin, I think they would watch the news. Your audience, me, you want to listen to someone you can relate with, someone whose story you want to hear. Your podcast needs to be able to meet that. So again, go if you feel like that's not what you have in mind, you need to go back and stick to your idea. Expound on it, do drop downs of like subtopics, and make sure in there is value somewhere. You need to provide value to people. That's the only way someone can listen to you for 30 minutes, 45 or 15 or even 20. That right there is golden. Now, moving on to, I think, the most exciting part for most of us, which I think usually the mistake we do is we focus on this as the first step than the actual ideation process. So I'm assuming at this point you've really laid solid ground on all these other things. Your why, your how, you figured out really why, your idea, why do you want to do this, what's your passion, what's the end goal, what do you want to get out of it, do you want to inspire people, change the world? I'm assuming at this point you've done all this. Let's talk equipment. From my experience, I really didn't start with any equipment, to be honest with you guys. I was younger and broke, but just passionate, really. I was in a house that had a movable wardrobe, so I remember just hopping in there so that I can keep out most of these sounds, the birds, and then to just get great sound out there, really. And so I'm going to speak for both sides. I'm going to assume you're someone starting out and you really don't have as much resources or even money to invest in. What I would say is, if you have an iPhone, the Voice Memos app has great, perfect sound for you to be able to record your podcast with crisp sound and put it out there. Like I said previously, at the end of the day, all that matters is content. If your content is not solid, it won't matter if you have, 1 million microphones in your studio. It will not matter. At the end of the day, your content is king. Your content is your entire, it's the only way to a successful podcast. That you cannot sabotage on it, you cannot compromise on it, you can't compromise on quality of mics, soundproof, and all these things. So if you also have friends, I would say, while using the Voice Memos app on the iPhone, if you can use your friend's car. I've noticed cars that have, when you look up everything, they're really good at shutting down sounds. So cars are also great spaces for you to just sit in there and record your episode and edit it and get it out. Now, if you are someone who has some money to invest and start a podcast, there are great places where you can buy mics here to begin with. Or if you're in a budget or a huge budget, you can also buy mics from Amazon. You can see the reviews on Rode mics, lapel mics, or whichever mics you are comfortable to use to start your own podcast. This can be very, very tricky depending on preference and reviews and all these things. But if you can find a great mic that can bring out your voice as audible as it can, then you're good to go. I won't really expound so much on equipment, because for me, progressively, of course, I did grow. I got my first legit pod mic, I think last year when I made the year. It was a birthday gift. And then over time, of course, as well, I've picked up lapel mics, My point here is I don't want you to hold back on starting your podcast because you're saying, I don't have equipment. You can actually start a podcast without a mic. Sounds like a cliche line. I started this restaurant with one spoon. Fortunately or unfortunately, you actually can with podcast. You can't start a podcast without a microphone. If you have an iPhone, good for you. Even the iPhone X has the same Voice Memos app. It's good with sound if you hold it perfectly well. The episode that I did with my dad, a conversation with my dad, I did use my iPhone. I was in Food Portal. I didn't have my mics with me. I just sat and made sure there was no background noise and had the conversation with him. It has an edit button that helps you cancel out background noise. That's why I say content is king. It won't matter if you're in Masaka or Kaberamaido or in Kampala or in the US. If you have great or value content, you should be good to go. Now, on recording and editing and publishing and batch recording all these episodes, if you're not tech savvy, now is the time you actually send me a DM or pick up the phone and call me. My details are on my website, they're on my LinkedIn, they're on my TikTok on how I can help you with all that. Over time, I've gotten really good at podcast editing and production, and if you need help with all that, please feel free to reach out. Of course, at a cost. But yeah, if you're as well, if you don't have the resources to if you have the time and don't have the resources, there are tutorials on YouTube that teach you how to edit, to record edits, put in sound beats, put in all these edits and to bring out like really great entertaining. You don't want an all around 60 minutes of you just talking without any breaks, without any, there is a way to do it, and you can get good at it with time, of course, with practice and then learning and unlearning a lot of things. On recording, I would say, which is a mistake I did as well, as you plan on putting out your first episode, before you put out your first episode, please, batch record at least 5-10 episodes ahead. Choose out a day, and after you've done your entire ideation process, that's why I keep referring to notebook. It's very important. You cannot lose those notes. You can't just come listening to this episode here and then say, okay, I'm going to start tomorrow. You need that piece of paper written on. You need that notebook with all your ideas in there so that you can refer to them. And then now in there, you are able to record 1, 2, 3 episodes, so that if you're releasing them monthly or bi-weekly or at whatever point you agree to do so, you don't have gaps. You don't put out one episode and then sit out another 2 months, which for me, that was, I think, has been the thing that's held me back so much, that I did not record my episodes, like batch record them. Like I'll just record one and be too excited. Oh my God, I can't wait. Put it out, and then now, for some reason, of course, a lot is happening. You fail to get the time and the space to like get into that element and record another episode again. So I would advise you to batch record your episodes, schedule them before you put out your first episode. That way you have enough to last you some time until you are energized enough and your element to be able to record another episode. I'm sure you're wondering, how often do you release your episodes? For me, 2 years now, I have 27 episodes. This will be my 28th episode. 2 years, that means those are 24 months. So when you do the math, you'd say, I did do the math. The first year, I think I released, 15, 14 episodes. And then in this year, the first year I released 12 episodes. I think that meant I released one per month. And now this year, it meant I've released 15, which makes them 27 to me. And I think I did one per month, and then maybe some months had 2 episodes. Again, that is not something I'm proud of, because I'm thinking I'm like, an entire 2 years, you only have 27 episodes to show. For me, I think it's a wake-up call, being who I am. But there is no pressure to it. I need to emphasize that. There is no pressure to you creative process, to you sharing process, depending on whatever you're talking about. You don't have to be on pressure. I remember when I put out season 2, at whatever point I was at in that time, I thought I would be able to push out episodes. Did I say weekly? Did I say every 2 weeks or weekly? And it was hard. I think I was able to keep up for a month or 2, and by the 3rd month I couldn't keep up, because like I said, there is no pressure to it. If your content is good, depending on how creative your process is or how you want to do this, really, it needs to be something you're comfortable with, so that you're not just pushing out content for the sake of, I say 2 weeks, I need an idea, I need to, so that you're not. Now, when life gets to that, that means your content is no longer going to be solid enough. You're just going to be doing for the sake of meeting the target you set, which now ruins the entire existence of how I like to believe podcasts should be. That's, for me, for my process, I like to believe that for everything I come on here and share, it has to come from deep within. I don't want to create buzzworthy content. This is trending. I need to do an episode about it. Or, for me, it has to come from within. It could be different for you. For you could say, I'm doing this entirely for this, and I have to, whether I have an idea or not, I need to. That could be you, but at the end of the day, what's the end goal? What's the point? What's your why? And for me, I think I'm so rooted in my why that I am not under any pressure to push out. As much as I am going through life, juggling work and that and that and this and that, each day, over time, I've learned to embrace an open mind, to be picking up information, to learn from experiences. So with that in mind, I have a lot of ideas scheduled for the coming weeks, because again, for me to come on here and share authentically, not to have picked something from a movie or from Mars, I have to go through it to come on here and share authentically with you as an audience, for you to relate with me. Now, on to the big question that a lot of people keep asking me. Are you making money off podcasts? Are you Have you gotten any sponsors? And honestly, I'm going to give it to you as raw as it comes. As of today, honestly, I think for the Ugandans that I know that are making money off podcasts are either doing podcasts as a full-time job. I have heard of, I think, Big Conference Ordinary People. I think he has the subscription format on, I think, Apple Podcasts, where to listen to the entire content, you'd have to pay a certain amount of money. I think I've heard of, is it the Ugandan Boy podcast or something like that? For you to be able to make money off podcasts right now, you'd need to, one, either have been at it for a while, and then probably doing it full time. It can't be a side gig. It can't be a passion project. It has to be something you're actually planning on capitalizing in, and say, I'm setting targets to push out this number of episodes, this amount of time. And then, because now by the time you pick up sponsorships, in this case with like sponsors to sponsor your podcast, to run their ads on there, you need to have numbers, and for you to get those numbers is you need to actually come aggressive at it. That means you need to actually plan out accordingly, like everything I've shared prior. But now say I am going big on this thing, and I need to, after a particular period of time, I need to make money off of it. Now it goes without saying, please do not get into podcasts with a goal of making money. That can't be your number one goal. At least for what I know about Uganda, you need to get into podcasts with, 1, you're passionate. 2, you want to provide value. 3, you probably want to inspire people, make a difference, change the world. If you are over there planning your podcast and saying, oh my God, I'm going to make money off podcasts, sorry, I hate to break it to you, you're not going to make any money. At least not for the first 1 or 2 years, depending on how smart you are, unless otherwise, which I'm open to. I want to hear a story of how people have made real money, and you know that, but there isn't actual real money that, I don't know, buys you land in God knows where, Kololo. There isn't, depending on the investment you've put in. Most of the podcasters, if you spoke to them, I'm sure they would say most of it is entirely really passion and providing value. So your satisfaction, your returns on investment come from reviews. Oh, I listened to your episode. I appreciate that. I learned so much. It changed my life. Oh, I listened to that episode. It opened my mind to something I'd never heard of before. Oh, like that is the actual returns on investment that you get out of podcasts at the start. Eventually, over time, as you grow your profile and your numbers and your network and your community, then you can now start pitching to different sponsors. Like, oh, like, hey, MTN, oh, hey, this, hey, that. Or I have this number of subscribers and listens every month, every episode. And I think if you came on board, and you'd be able to, that way, you'd be able to make money off of it. And of which that's a community you grow over time, but also you grow by providing value. You grow because you've done your ground rooting very, very well. I want to believe that I've covered all the bases really on how to start until the point of publishing your first episode. If you've done all that, I want to believe you're ready to put your voice out there and share your ideas and knowledge and actually change the world. If you need help with any of the technical parts, record it. We could be as early as ideation, really. I am here to help as a service at a fee. Reach out to me today so that I can help you with your entire ideation, editing, recording, and publishing your first episode. Moving forward, you'll probably need artwork and all these other things as well that I am able to help you. I know people that are really good at podcast graphics, like the guy that did my podcast work. Like I've created a network of people that are like experts at web development. If you've seen my website, if you haven't, please go check it out, joanneinabiona.com. You've seen my work everywhere, really. If you don't have to do it alone, and I think it's easier when you have 3 minds all discussing your podcast. Then the more the merrier. 3 heads are better than 1, right? 2 heads are better than 1, but 3, 4, the more the merrier, really. You get more ideas, you're more open-minded, really, to even come up with bigger ideas for your podcast. You don't have to do it alone. Unlike for me, that most of the things I did them by myself, so I learned on the job, which I think is like been the greatest training, which better positions me to be able to help you to start your podcast. And this includes all the nitty-gritties, really, the technical stuff, supplying your RSS feed to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that is no longer in use. But yeah, YouTube podcasts, wherever you want to put your podcast, I am able to help you. So please reach out today. I appreciate you for taking the time to listen to this episode. I hope it was of value, it was resourceful, and most of this really are just surface resources. I have enough expertise by now really to just I am able to record and publish my episodes in 30 minutes, because that's how good I've gotten at it. I mean, this is an ad, personal ad. I am self-promoting. Feel free to reach out if you need help with launching, starting your podcast, or supplying your podcast to wherever you want it. This is a wrap-up of Season 2. I will see you guys in Season 3. Oh, and just a sneak peek in what to expect in Season 3. Great conversations, really. Next month is my birthday, and I've evolved. I've grown. My mind, my head is in different spaces, really. I am excited about all the conversations we are yet to have. The 2 years I've been at it, if there's anything that's been affirming for me, is that this podcast matters. These conversations matter. And I am not tired. I can only say I am only just getting started. God's been faithful to equip me with the best people, the most resourceful people that constantly work my brain and fill my cup. But honestly, seriously guys, thank you for taking the time to listen into this episode. Share it on with a friend who's been talking about starting a podcast for the last 1 year, but they're either shy or scared. I am able to pep talk you out of that stuff. Let me know what you think. I appreciate you for taking the time to listen to this episode. I hope it was of value, it was resourceful. So I'll see you guys in Season 3. Thank you for taking the time always to listen in to me. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.